When you start to pay attention, you will see that the lines between opposites are much thinner than they should be, because the line between pleasure and pain is so thin that it almost overlaps sometimes. But how can that be? Because pain is all the way over there, pleasure is all the way over there, but at some point they overlap. And then you think about love and hate, and those feelings are so far from each other, the feeling of loving someone and hating someone. But somehow at some point, they almost brush against each other and sometimes overlap each other. And that seems to happen a lot. Now, why do you think that is? It's because they're two faces of the same coin. They are, in fact, the same thing. And I'll even go a step beyond that and say that everything is the same thing. So we can even take positive and negative, and you'll say that's not the same thing. And I'll say they're two faces of the same thing, because one cannot exist without the other. Positive cannot exist without negative. Negative cannot exist without positive. They're the same thing. Just like you can't have one face of a mountain without the other. You can't have one side of the rock without the other side of the rock. They're both the same thing. And you can keep going, and it keeps getting scarier and scarier when you start to think, is white black? Because black and white, they're so far away from each other, but they're the same thing. Because light and dark, good and bad, all of those opposites, they're not these two separate things far away from each other on the opposite side of the room. They are, in fact, the same thing in a very complex and ever-changing balance, trying to reach a homeostasis, trying to reach equilibrium. And in that battle for balance, your perception leads you to incorrect conclusions. And so everything in reality is the same. And you'll tell me, Andrew, how can that be? Because I've been poor and I've been rich. Those are not the same. I've been full and I've been hungry. Those are not the same. And while those experiences feel different, they are in fact in contrast to each other and require each other to have that experience. And so it helps to make sense of life when you see this perspective. This is not going to simply solve your problems. What this is and what this will do is become a helpful tool for you to shift your perception and to mold your perspective of reality so that you can use reality to your advantage. So if we think about happiness in terms of contrast, your experience in one direction, positive or negative, will drastically impact your perception of that contrast. What I mean by that is if you're a poor person and you cannot afford the things that a rich person has, you can have as much, if not more, satisfaction out of your life than a rich person. And I'm not just saying this to make you feel better if you're a poor person listening to this. I'm telling you that if you save up for years of your life and you get a small home that's your home, that you spent years cultivating the work and effort, that purchase of that home will be more significant to you than someone who owns many homes and is receiving the home several times the value of your little home, and they're getting it for free or they're getting it out of a dividend. They're buying something or getting something that on paper has so much more measurable value, but the experience that they are getting is a fraction. It's a minuscule grain of sand compared to the mountain that you might be getting after you've scrimped and saved to reach this goal. And the results are not as valuable as the effort that you put in. And the effort becomes the reward in and of itself. So don't be tempted to limit yourself because you find yourself constrained by economic resources or by life circumstances. The ability to use contrast of experiences to your advantage exists for everyone in everything. And within this contrast, you'll notice another unique feature, that this balance can be disrupted so easily. If someone only wants money and they're hungry for money, and there's another person that wants to do a good job, they don't want money, they want to do a good job, you will hire the person that wants to do a good job. And what a unique and ironic twist that is, that the person that wants money, going after money, that's what you're supposed to do, right? You go after what you want. He's going after money directly, but in that pursuit, he's being pushed further and further away from money. While the other person, that's not even his priority. His priority is to do a good job. In his effort to do this other thing, he gets pushed towards money. And you'll notice this is not the only place this happens. This happens in many areas of life over and over again. The same pattern repeats and repeats. You think about somebody who's desperate for love or a relationship, acceptance, validation. The harder that they try to push, the harder that they try to force and control and make other people give them the results that they want, the further the authenticity and the chances of those results become, the harder that they squeeze. And in the inverse sense, when you're not looking for those things, when you're not actively seeking the goal of gaining love from another person, that is when love most often enters your life. And the final example that I love is when a little bit of eggshell falls into the egg that you've broken, and you try to get the egg shell out with your finger. Every time you push directly on it, it slips away. And the harder that you try to get it, the faster that it slips away. And the only way you get it is by going next to it, adjacent. And isn't that interesting? That to get to the other face of the coin, you can't just reach directly for it. You have to reach adjacent to it. If there is two sides, two faces to everything, how come they don't seem as visible? I think about violence, and violence is so loud, so clear, palpable, and it's so powerful. What could possibly be on the other face of violence? And to figure that out, I thought, violence is a physical expression of control, and it's control of others, generally coming from a lack of self-control, a lack of self-regulation, a lack of emotional control. And within that theme of control, violence is a very clear and loud message. And so if we were going to think, what's the opposite side of that? It would have to be something that is not controlling, that is in fact freeing, that is a physical expression of freedom, that is not clear, that is ambiguous, that is not loud, it will be quiet. And the thing on the opposite side of violence is kindness. And if kindness truly sits on the opposite face of violence, shouldn't it be just as powerful? Shouldn't it have some way to express itself in a way that is as equal, if not more powerful than violence? Because if they're sitting on the same coin and they're the same thing, their extremes must reach similar distances. But why don't nations invade with kindness armies? Why don't police just shoot friendly bullets that say, hey, stop, friend, to criminals? Why doesn't that happen? And it's because it's not a one-to-one. The balance of reality is not easily apples to apples. And to understand, where does the power of kindness come from? Where is that hidden? How is it being expressed in reality? I had to go and find where the most powerful expressions of kindness would be. And to find that, I wanted to look in a space where violence dominates and would make it very difficult for kindness to be expressed or even exist. And the place that I thought would be the most controlling, the most violent, would be in death row. I reviewed experiences from prisoners on death row and at maximum security prisons, and their observations and interactions with kindness. Because for kindness to exist there, it's got to be pretty powerful. For more about that, check out my next episode. Don't forget to support the show with a sweet hoodie. Thanks.